What are we looking at, guys? These are small block Ford manifolds from SVO. And before we proceed, I will look at some of the modified manifolds I've done for the factory 5.0. And these are 5.0 manifolds. Thank you to WALLY BEBER of SVO and Isaac Martin, another hardcore Ford guy. Here we go. Let's start.
Hello, good morning, good day, good evening. This is Ben Almeida Racing. Today we will touch on some of the modifications that I did on the factory GT40 manifold that came at that time when this 5.0 craze started to really get big. As well as I'm showing some modifications of stock factory intake and of course the GT40, which I mentioned earlier. And also I will be showing here some factory manifold from SVO. And my genuine thanks to appreciation to Wally Bieber of SVO as an engineer, and of course to Isaac Martin, who's instrumental in me getting hold of these pictures. These are never seen before, and I will also include some of the engineering comments that Wally has forwarded to Isaac and try to get some insight to what they were trying to do. And it's very, very interesting. Okay, so having that in mind, when we try to improve on the factory manifold, and to think about it, the GT40 is gorgeous looking manifold, especially the tubular type. Okay, and that is nice, but I still prefer the Z28 TPI. Okay, with the throttle body in front, and then it's got the plenum, and then those intercrossing or interconnecting manifold runners underneath it is very impressive looking. The SVO manifold, this one here I'm showing, is comparable to that, or maybe even better. It seems like they may have a dual throttle body provision, whereas the GM TPI, the twin port injection, as good looking as it from what I could see, it's somewhat also limited, especially when you stroke the engine combination, and the runners are much too long and probably a little bit on the small side. But that being said, it looks good, and I bet you it helped them sell a lot of cars. Because when you look at the Ford intake manifold, we're looking at on my LX here. The throttle body is on the right side shock tower. It really looks ugly. All right, but that said, I will show you some improvements that I've done with these things, and here they are. When you look at this intake port, this D port, it's just not D on the flange. I took it all the way in. When the runner gets in and dives, all right, I flatten the floor to slow down the airspeed, or else it'll just slam on the long side, and you're going to have a lot of turbulent flow, so forth, so on. But when you do the D port, you carry it all the way through, right? Give it a wider short side per se. Okay, it's not a cylinder head, but still an intake manifold. It's still an intake port. So you widen it and bring it in. At the flange, you make sure that you also bring it in. You cut through, not just flange it. And I've seen a lot of people just flange it. They export it. No, it's not. It's just flanged. You take that and take the long side and straighten it out. That has a tendency to decrease the airspeed there and not slam everything to one side. Because anytime you have a constriction, the velocity picks up. Just like when you look at a water hose, when you choke the opening, you see it pick up speed, sometimes too fast, right? So now what you want to do is try to navigate that turn in order it's manageable for the air to basically go in there without much impediment or without much turbulence. This one shows that. And also on the GT40, I did the same thing. You see the welded runners, especially on the front two or front four. I took the dog leg out of it and made it straight. You can fill in the other part, but I didn't find it necessary, really. I didn't really see much gain.
Here's the point.
Now,
This manifold
the GT40 and the stock. You got to fill this in, get rid of the dog leg, straighten that out, straighten up, pour it out. Big difference there. Okay? So when you look at the runners, now they're straight, much straighter. Okay, this is just a very quick thing. All right, so that's what you're looking at. And the other side of that manifold, the weld there is for the front of the last cylinder, and right there, all tap to straighten out the port. Okay, and we'll paint it. So when it's all done, you will see with the fuel line injector and fuel lines here, you will not even see the welds or the epoxy. And if you really want to be slick, paint it black. With the upper manifold on it, you won't even hardly see. Now on the GT40 tubular intake top, I cut this part here off the a stud, and I put a plate across the whole side because it has a tendency to make an S. When you look at the throttle body, it has an S. I removed that one S, okay, by cutting that and welding a plate. Now it's more straight and just has one bend instead of two bad turns. And it helps out, especially on their boosting condition. Even NA, I was able to do that. Here's the manifold on the GT40. And what I do is cut this section here of the pipe, and then I weld an aluminum plate around here. When I do that, you don't have that S-bend out here anymore. Okay, when you try to weld an aluminum plate there, and then just run a stud on the bottom and put a nut, then the plate is welded here, and you won't have this S-bend. It'll just be an open, straightforward runner. Great for NA, especially for boosted. At that time as well, extrude hone was big. In fact, Chris Kaufman Products was, I remember, the first one to really push for extrude hone intake manifolds, especially tractor ones. And they were impressive. They did pretty good. But what I would have done is I would have straightened out some of the bad angles and then extrude hone it. Now you get better. All right? But, of course, that takes time and money. But either way, I'm trying to split little things here just to get as much advantage as I can. All right? The extrude hone is very good. It does the job. But I do more of a roughen up, do more changes that I like to see, and then I extrude hone. That seems to be the best configuration. Also, at that time, I was running a stock 86 only throttle body because it has no cuts around where the hose slips in. And I'm able to make a Venturi. That said, I think the 65 millimeter made 12. This modified A6 made 11. All right? With superior low and mid-range. A lot more. And every time you hit second gear, it doesn't have to, like a somewhat of a fog, and then to pick RPM up again. All right? The modified manifold, whatever, the GT40 or the stock intake with the stock 86 type throttle body, that's what I do. Okay? I modify it looking like this, and I tell you what, it's dead even on any given combination. All right, it leaves much harder, giving away 1 horsepower, but all through the rev range, it seems to have a lot more stronger low and mid range, especially when you got automatic or even with a 5-speed with 370, 355, 410 gears, sure. All right, now when you get like a 430 or 410, whatever, sure, the 65 probably will show something there. But 1 horsepower, it's debatable. And I just say, hey, stock intake, stock throttle body here. Give me a job. Bad mistake. Needless to say, all these GT40 intake or the what I call that, the Explorer intake, which looks like a GT40. Um, I would not use them on a healthy 347. Somebody packing with like 11-to-1 compression ratio, a little bit on the tad small side. I would use them on a, something with compression or even stock compression, 9-to-1, 302, 306s, whatever. Okay, but I would put them on a healthy 347. 331 is already iffy, right? But what the modification I've shown helps. The stock intake with the deep port layout is very impressive for a stock stroke 302. All right? Don't have any illusions that it will produce as good as the TFS intake manifold or the Edelbrocks and all the other aftermarket ones out there. It will not compare. But I'm sure there are others that would still try to prove otherwise, and just to bring home a point that they can go fast with any given combination. I've been proven wrong. Most of us have. Nothing really surprising there. Some guys just got the knack for it, and they start doing all sorts of different things, and it surprises everyone. When you say never, you open yourself up to future criticism. Okay? As far as racing is concerned, hot rodding, whatever, and there are other offbeat combinations out there that shows a lot of power. So let's be aware of that. Let me make a comment about the 5.0 scene out here in the West Coast. At that time, we dominated with Kaufman. Did the first 10 and 9-second pass here on the West Coast. And everybody then were like blowing up left and right. And one of the things that I've noticed that I haven't been going in that trend is that they take the factory lower manifold, be it GT40 or the stock intake, and they port it, all right? And they put this box intake made out of plastic. I know a lot of you guys may know about this. It's a box with a throttle body on one side. Now, I have much to say about that combination. You got to realize that the 302 8.2 deck block. Here's a 351. Runners are longer from the center. Here's a 302, shorter from the center. So the runners are much shorter. Now, what is going to happen here? You're going to lose torque. The 5.0 is very impressive due to the fact that the runners are very long compared to the 350, Z28, or TPI. Long enough that they boost the bottom end torque. Okay, the ram resonance, all that motion, monkey motion going on to the intake port when the intake valve closes, the flow stops shut and then springs up and loads up, or the intake manifold, not the head, starts to recover. Well, I would say the intake manifold is part of the intake port or the cylinder head. Of course, ram resonance, all that, they all complement each other. That's why when you tip in this 5.0 engines, they have a lot of response. I mean, it feels like a big block, or feels like a bigger block than 302. So when you look at a TPI at that time, talking about the IROC and a 302 Ford, you can look at, boy, they seem to respond just the same. With the 302 displacing roughly 50 cubic inches less, having a lot of torque has got a lot to do with the runner. But now the low deck height and the corresponding shorter runners compared to 351. I know a lot of racers put the box intake, even with the blower. All right. What happens there? Their low and mid-range response still suffers. That's why I'm, at that time running real hard because I got a lower manifold, I have a longer runner on my engine than the other guys would. Put worse by a box intake at that time. And I could leave the line so freaking hard and they're getting left on. That was it. I think peak horsepower will probably be the same. I'm just on my usable RPM range where it's pulling me real good. All right, we're all nitrous small block. I was running a 331. Okay, and I know a lot of guys were also running 331 or 347s. some even 363s, 353s with 325 strokes and a 3400. And I know one 50 guys out there, he blew the front end of his vibration, took the whole diamond cover out, and he swore that he had a factory 2-volt block. And when I look in there, you can see the 4-volt main main cap on the front. The billet main cap, it's not even the cast, you know, cast iron or nodular iron type caps on the factory 50s. No way. But hey, whatever claim you get, as long as you can win the race, whatever, you know, I mean, they can believe what you're saying or not. But there you go. I run a 331. It's even more susceptible with a shorter type runner due to the fact what A2 I can run a 351 and that fuel injected manifold. It's taller here, longer to the intake valve, longer runner. It might not be as detrimental for mid-range power, but it was with the A2. And I was real quiet about that back then, and that was to my advantage. I won all the races here. But some of the guys on the East Coast, Mid-America, whatever, they got it right, just like I got it right. That's why we were dominating. Of course, on this modified manifold, I ran the Felpro 1262. Back then, there was not even an R because it blocks off the EGR port from the head and heats up the intake manifold. Of course, when you block that EGR port, of course, your EGR valve don't work right by the throttle body, but that's okay. That's basically strip modification, right? I don't suggest this for street type cars. These are all strictly racing modification, not EPA legal. Let me rephrase that in there. When you do that, then you keep the manifold heat a lot less than if the EGR was installed. In fact, back then, a lot of the 50 guys would make a run, especially the supercharged one, get back to the pits, pop the hood, or take off the hood if it's a fiberglass type. They put ice packs on top. It looked like the engine had a headache. There's ice packs on top of the intake manifold. That's for their purpose. They know that heat is their issue with this F5 because it's a dry intake. You're not flowing any fuel inside. So the means of controlling through the Jones-Thompson effect of cooling the intake charge is not evident. The dry manifold runs hotter than a comparable 4V with a carburetor, or even a high ram intake with a throttle body and the intake, the fuel injection, the fuel injectors are right there at the flange. If the injector is wide on top, it'll spray and cool the intake charge down. You have to take note of that.
Unheard and never been seen SVO 5.0 manifolds. Here they are. Thanks again to WALLY BEBER and, of course, my buddy Isaac Martin. You heard me say among the factory manifolds, I love the IROC twin port injection manifold. The way it sits in front of the engine, it looks good. Well, here we are, an SVO Ford 5.0 manifold. So I wonder what the fit would be where it goes right on top of the distributor. Perhaps it's going to be better looking than the right side look of the factory 5.0 manifold. Top shot of that manifold, you can see the crossover tube that connects both plenums so that they would pretty much get a signal off each other and get a more balanced intake pull on that V8. So interesting. From here, you can see the crossover. Perhaps a hose probably connects those two. I don't think they will weld that, or maybe some kind of neoprene or good hose and seal it up with a clamp. Now you can see the obvious GT40 layout of the upper part of this manifold. I kind of maybe tend to believe that this section here is raised to clear the distributor, perhaps, or maybe. This looks like a different manifold because the crossover, as you can see here, is cast between these two left and right side plenum. Interesting. Well, the previous one looked like a cast aluminum. This looks like a sheet metal style. So I guess they're real busy out there by SVO. Mr. BEBER there, probably doing this prototyping. If you notice, this cast manifold has a little narrower intake runner, whereas the sheet metal is round or oval, more round. And just look at the difference. This might be a lower RPM unit. A look at the underside of this manifold. As you can see, those two square holders there at the front, perhaps that might be a coil pack for the spark plugs. Might not have a distributor, might have a crank trigger. So that's what I'm looking at. That's why they're able to do this and fit underneath the hood. What do you guys think? Here's look like the sheet metal aluminum manifold compared to the stock casting on the previous photo. Look at the round intake ports. This looks like a more higher RPM unit. This is the correspondence between Mr. Wally Bieber of SVO and Isaac Martin, who writes for a lot of publication, and we corresponded for many years and collaborated on a book. He had me in there from HP Books about small block Fords. Anyway, read on and see what it is. This is the dyno reading. I kind of figured one of the dynos at the Ford factory. Interesting. This is the Ford Windsor book by Isaac Martin, and it was published in 1994 by HP Books, and it sold quite a bunch. That was a time that people were seeking out any information to the then emerging 5.0 craze, and people wanted good information. It all came down to guys like myself who's been long-term Ford racing engine builders or racers, and they needed our information and how best to approach to making horsepower. And the picture here on the cover is one of my customers, engine. Okay, and he lives in Vegas right now, and that is his engine on the cover of the book. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. And thank you very much again to Isaac Martin and Wally Bieber. Thank you very much, sir.